In this episode, we move into a topic that sits underneath many of the systems people use every day, but often remains invisible until something goes wrong. And that topic is database management. For a brand new learner, a database may sound like a technical storage container that only specialists need to understand. But in practice, it is one of the most important foundations of modern business operations. Customer records, payroll data, inventory details, financial transactions, medical information, and countless other forms of information are stored, organized, and retrieved through databases. If that information is inaccurate, unavailable, exposed, or corrupted, the business can slow down or even stop. That is why database management matters so much in audit, governance, and security work. It is not only about storing data in an orderly way. It is about making sure that data remains useful, protected, reliable, and available to support the real work of the organization. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A database is an organized collection of data designed so that information can be stored, updated, searched, and retrieved in a controlled way. The software that helps manage this information is often called a database management system, DBMS. The DBMS acts as the layer between the raw data and the people or applications that need to use it. Instead of users directly handling disconnected files, the DBMS provides structure, rules, access control, and methods for working with data consistently. This matters because businesses rarely depend on a few isolated records. They depend on large collections of related information that must stay organized over time. A good database environment helps prevent confusion, duplication, and disorder by giving the organization a dependable way to capture and use information. Without sound database management, data may still exist, but it quickly becomes harder to trust, harder to protect, and harder to use effectively. One of the most helpful beginner ideas is that a database is not valuable just because it holds information. Its value comes from how well that information can support decisions, transactions, and daily operations. A customer database is useful because staff can retrieve accurate account details when needed. A payroll database is useful because compensation calculations and records remain consistent and available at the right time. A sales database is useful because leaders can rely on it for reporting, forecasting, and trend analysis. In each case, the organization depends on more than storage. It depends on order, consistency, and reliable access. This is why database management is often tied to business confidence. When data is incomplete, stale, or inconsistent, people stop trusting the systems built on top of it. When database management is strong, the information becomes a dependable asset that supports the business rather than a hidden source of recurring confusion and risk. Databases can be organized in different ways, but for beginners, it is often enough to understand that structure matters because structure determines how data relates to other data. Some databases arrange information into tables with rows and columns, while others are built to support different kinds of relationships or larger volumes of varied data. Regardless of the model, the goal is to make information easier to store, connect, and retrieve without unnecessary duplication or contradiction. If customer names are stored in 5 separate places with slight differences in spelling or address data, then reporting and service quality will suffer. If product information and order information are related properly, the organization can answer meaningful business questions much more reliably. Database management, therefore, includes logical organization, not just technical storage. It asks how the information should be arranged so the business can use it effectively while keeping errors, inconsistency, and confusion under control over time. A major responsibility in database management is maintaining data integrity, which means protecting the accuracy, completeness, and consistency of data throughout its life. This is a central idea because information loses its value very quickly when users cannot trust that it is correct. If a bank balance is inaccurate, if an inventory count is duplicated, or if one record partially updates while a related record does not, business processes can fail in ways that affect customers, employees, and decisions. Integrity depends on rules and controls that help keep data in a valid state. These controls may include required fields, format checks, relationship rules between records, validation at the application level, and careful handling of updates so that one action does not leave the database in a broken condition. For a new learner, this is one of the most important insights. A database is not well managed merely because it is full of data. It is well managed when the organization can reasonably trust that the data remains accurate and internally consistent. Access control is another core part of database management because not everyone should be able to view, change, or delete all information. Databases often contain highly sensitive business and personal data, so the organization must control who can do what and under what conditions. Some users may need to read data, but not change it. Some administrators may need to maintain the database platform without seeing all the business content stored inside it. Applications may need tightly limited access to perform specific functions while being prevented from making broader changes. These distinctions matter because excessive access increases the risk of misuse, error, fraud, and accidental damage. Strong database management supports the principle of least privilege, meaning access should be limited to what is necessary for a user or process to perform its role. This protects confidentiality, reduces unnecessary exposure, and makes accountability stronger because actions inside the database can be tied more clearly to approved responsibilities rather than broad, poorly controlled access rights. Security in database management goes beyond simple user access and includes broader protection of the database environment itself. The database server, the operating system supporting it, the network connections reaching it, and the applications that interact with it all create part of the overall risk picture. A database may have strong internal permissions and still be exposed if the surrounding environment is weak. Poor patching, insecure connections, unprotected backups, excessive administrative privileges, or vulnerable applications can all put the information at risk even when the database software itself is functioning normally. This is why database management should never be treated as a narrow specialty with no connection to wider operational control. Good management considers where the data resides, how it moves, how it is protected in storage and during transmission, and how surrounding systems might affect database security and reliability. For audit and governance purposes, the key lesson is that protecting a database means protecting the whole environment that allows it to function. Availability is also essential because data is only useful if authorized users and systems can reach it when needed. A database may contain perfect information, but if it becomes unavailable during payroll processing, patient care, or customer transactions, the business impact can still be severe. Database management, therefore, includes planning for uptime, performance, and resilience. This means understanding which databases are critical, how much downtime the organization can tolerate, and what measures are in place to reduce the chance of disruption. Those measures might include redundancy, careful maintenance planning, resource monitoring, and tested recovery arrangements. Performance matters here as well, because a database that is technically online but too slow to support normal business work may feel nearly unavailable from the user's point of view. Strong database management recognizes that availability is not only about whether the service is on. It is also about whether the database can support the workload placed on it at the times the business depends on it most. Backup and recovery are among the most visible parts of database management because they determine whether the organization can restore information after corruption, failure, accidental deletion, or other disruptions. It is not enough to assume that backup jobs are running. Management should understand what is being backed up, how often the backups occur, how complete they are, where they are stored, and whether recovery has actually been tested. A backup that exists only in theory offers false comfort if it cannot restore the database to a usable state within the required time. Recovery planning is especially important for databases because the information they hold is often changing constantly, and the organization may need to know not only whether it can recover, but how much recent data could be lost in the process. Good database management therefore treats backup and recovery as active operational controls rather than background tasks. The true test is not whether a backup report says success. The true test is whether the organization can restore trusted data when the business urgently needs it. Another important concept is transaction handling, which helps databases process related actions in a way that preserves consistency even when many users and applications are working at the same time. A transaction is a unit of work that should either complete properly or not be left half-finished. This matters because modern business systems often perform many linked actions together. A payment may involve updating an account balance, recording a ledger entry, and creating an audit trail. If one part succeeds and another part fails without proper control, the database can end up in a state that misrepresents reality. Good database management uses transaction control to help prevent that outcome. Closely related is concurrency, which refers to multiple activities happening at once. When many users access the same data simultaneously, the database must handle those interactions carefully so one action does not unintentionally overwrite or conflict with another. These ideas may sound technical, but the business lesson is simple. Database management must preserve order even when many things are happening at the same time. Change management has a direct connection to database management because changes to database structures, settings, permissions, and software versions can create major business impact if handled carelessly. A small adjustment to a table, an index, an access rule, or a database configuration parameter may affect performance, reporting, application behavior, or data integrity in ways that are not obvious at first. That is why database changes should be requested, reviewed, tested, approved, and documented rather than made casually in live environments. Patch management is also important because database platforms, like other software, receive updates that address security weaknesses, defects, and performance issues. At the same time, updates must be planned carefully because poorly handled patching can interrupt services or create compatibility problems with applications that depend on the database. Good database management therefore lives inside broader operational discipline. It is strengthened when changes are visible, controlled, and recoverable instead of being treated as quick technical adjustments that do not require wider oversight. Monitoring and logging help the organization understand how the database is behaving over time and whether warning signs are appearing before users are affected. A well-managed database environment looks for patterns such as performance slowdown, failed jobs, storage pressure, unusual access attempts, repeated errors, or changes in workload that may signal future trouble. Monitoring matters because many database problems do not appear all at once. They often begin as gradual deterioration, recurring warnings, or unusual spikes that can be addressed early if someone is watching. Logging is equally valuable because it provides evidence of what happened, when it happened, and how the database responded. This supports troubleshooting, incident response, audit review, and accountability for sensitive activities. Without effective monitoring and logging, teams may discover database issues only after business disruption becomes obvious, and at that point recovery is often slower and more uncertain. Strong database management uses visibility as a control, not just as a convenience. Data lifecycle thinking also belongs in database management because information should not remain in the same state forever without regard to business need, legal obligations, or operational value. Some data is highly active and needs fast access for daily transactions. Some becomes historical and may be referenced less often, but still needs to be retained. Some eventually reaches the point where it should be archived or securely disposed of according to policy and regulatory requirements. Managing this life cycle well helps control storage growth, supports performance, reduces clutter, and limits unnecessary exposure of sensitive information. It also helps the organization decide what should remain readily available and what should be preserved mainly for record-keeping, analytics, or legal reasons. Database management is therefore not just about protecting live production data in the moment. It is also about governing information over time so that data remains aligned with real business purpose rather than accumulating endlessly without clear ownership, retention logic, or disposal discipline. From an audit perspective, database management offers many clues about the maturity of operational control in an organization. An auditor is not expected to administer a database personally, but should be able to assess whether management has reasonable processes for protecting access, maintaining integrity, supporting availability, controlling change, backing up data, monitoring performance, and responding to incidents affecting the database environment. Weak control environments often show familiar signs such as broad access rights, undocumented changes, unreliable recovery practices, incomplete monitoring, and uncertainty about who is accountable for key decisions. Stronger environments can explain their database roles, their control processes, and the business reasons behind them. They can also show evidence that those controls are active rather than merely described in policy. For a learner studying this area, the important point is that database management is not only about technical expertise. It is also about whether the organization governs one of its most valuable information assets with care, visibility, and discipline. Database management should feel much larger than the narrow idea of storing records in a technical system. It is the practice of organizing, protecting, maintaining, and governing data so that the business can rely on it for transactions, decisions, and everyday operations. Good database management means preserving integrity, controlling access, supporting security, maintaining performance, planning for recovery, handling change carefully, monitoring behavior, and managing data throughout its life cycle. When these practices are strong, the organization gains confidence that critical information remains useful, available, and trustworthy even under stress. When they are weak, the business may suffer from errors, delays, exposure, or loss that reaches far beyond the database team itself. For a new learner, the central takeaway is clear. Databases are not just containers for information. They are living operational foundations, and managing them well is essential to business reliability, security, and effective governance.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.